Welcome beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy. Like countless others, Reiki found me when I wasn't even looking, and then it ignited a whole new world of questions. This podcast explores topics of interest for the spiritually curious. Join me for discussions and special guests on subjects such as past lives, crystal healing, spiritual awakening, ascension, energy healing, and more, all to assist and inspire you along your unique soul's journey. After hearing from so many of you requesting in-person Reiki training, I've gone and done it. I've scheduled classes right here in Ann Arbor, Michigan in October. Join me for a Reiki 1 and 2 class or a Reiki Master class. Plus, I've also scheduled a very special event you won't want to miss. Find out all the details and register at mainstreamreiki.com. Seats are limited, so I invite you to check it out quickly. Thanks so much for listening and being a fan of the show here. I can't wait to see you this October. Welcome to Beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea, and today I'm welcoming back for you Carole J. Obley, and she is an acclaimed spiritual medium and the author of 4 books on mediumship and the afterlife. She's conducted over 15,000 readings that typically include accurate names, personality descriptions, and validating details, along with grief support and afterlife teachings. Known for her compassion and her integrity, Carole also offers practical, intuitive guidance on life issues like relationships, business, and spirituality. You might recognize her from being featured multiple times on Coast to Coast, as well as other popular programs. In addition to readings, she teaches both in-person and online workshops, and you'll find more information down in the show notes, links to everything that will connect you to Carole, and also a link to our previous conversation here on the podcast. Carole, I'm just so thrilled to have you, and I couldn't believe you've written another book, and so I can't wait to get into that with you. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for having me. And actually, there are 5 books. But the first one is sort of a metaphysical handbook. That one I wrote way back in 2003. But this is the 4th book with my publisher, collectiveinc.com.
Oh, I see. I see. Beautiful. Well, thanks for setting us straight on that and letting us know you're even a more prolific writer. And, this book, I guess my first question then is why this book? Why did you decide to write this book now? And, the title of the book, go ahead and tell us that. And then if you would let us know, why did you think you needed to write this one?
Well, the main title is The Art of Sensing. And through challenging times, following the voice of our soul through what all of us will experience, and that includes challenges in life. So there are 2 main reasons why I chose to write this. Why I was sort of prompted by spirit to write this. The first is what's going on out there in the collective consciousness, and the confusion, the fear, the anger, the division. And I wanted to show and to help people understand that beyond all the externals that seem to really divide us or separate us, that there is one unifying factor that really rises above and transcends all of that division. And that's our identity as spirit. And so that was through my observations and experience of what's going on currently in the collective consciousness. The second reason and inspiration for the art of sensing is multiple readings of people wanting to know what their purpose is. And I've been working now 30 years as a professional medium. So over and over and over again, I've heard people say, I don't know what my purpose is. How do I find that out? What does it mean? How do I step onto that pathway? So I really wanted to um, give some sort of a guide on how to do that, how to listen to that sacred voice of the soul that is within each of us.
Yes, I just think that the time is so ripe right now for these kinds of messages. And you followed your guidance, as you mentioned, to write this book. And the book opens with a vivid childhood memory. And I'm wondering if you could share about that right here, because I just loved this story and I thought it was so just delicious and relatable for a lot of people. So could you share that?
Yeah, the book opens with when I was about 10 years old, and this was back in the 60s. And I was sitting with my mother on a Saturday evening watching the Miss America pageant, and I was setting my hair in curlers to go to church the next day. Well, there's a talent portion of that show. And one of the contestants came on, and she was an interpreter for the deaf. And I was mesmerized by, the hand gestures and the expression on her face. And I just was really taken in with that. And I turned to my mom and I said, that's what I want to be when I grow up. And my mother just sort of looked at me because this was probably about the fourth or fifth thing that I said I wanted to be. I wanted to be an archaeologist at one point, exploring Egypt. Um, but I kind of forgot about that over the years. But later on, and as I was writing The Art of Sensing, it struck me that was a very early, I was just 10 years old, a very early message from my soul, coming from my soul, of being a communicator for those who can't hear. And so I sort of looked at that as an analogy for my work as a medium, hearing, sensing, and then speaking that for people who want to know, who want that communication. And thank you for mentioning that because I think that that's a really important part that people understand that even as children, we sort of have these, wake up calls and where our soul is speaking to us. And maybe we don't completely understand it at the time, but then as we grow in our, uh, in our wisdom and our soul evolves, then we kind of can make that connection of how we were being given these messages and direction, importantly, direction when we were really young.
The part that I just love about this story, well, I had the vision of you sitting there with your mom. It was really nicely described in the book, but I enjoyed that. But what a light bulb moment, right? Now, not for you maybe as a 10-year-old, but as I read the story and then knowing you now and what your work is, it struck me so clearly, this communication, but also a translator from one way of being, one way of engaging with life, one realm to the other. That's really what this woman was doing on the television. And that's really what you do now. And the thing that you said a minute ago, well, you didn't really put those pieces together until you were writing the book. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I might have thought of it, somewhat sometime before I actually sat down to write The Art of Sensing. But it really didn't occur to me, start the book this way.
Ah, mhm.
Started to sort of draw people's curiosity of, and I mean, this totally true story. It's nothing I made up. But you know how we've all heard the expression, hindsight is 2020, right? So looking back there, just these moments of childhood that'll flash in for all of us. And then putting two and two together and seeing, oh, my soul was really, that was encoded in my soul, which I've discovered through many years, 30 years of doing mediumship, that we do make plans before we come here, meaning to the physical realm. And so those are encoded within our consciousness. But until they're ready to, come out of the oven, so to speak, we sort of get these clues, and these synchronicities. Um, and it was many years later, Andrea, until in my mid to late 30s, until I stepped onto the pathway of mediumship. And that came about through a very uh, catastrophic thing, and that was a fire. I was running a business, and we had an electrical fire overnight. And so that completely took me off of that pathway. In my earlier books, I wrote about that and how something, and this is also an important point for people to understand too, that sometimes what we see as very uh, disarming, very catastrophic, very painful, very traumatic, actually is going to put us in a new place if we just hold on and can get through it and follow the direction of our soul.
Yes, that's an important element, I think. And in the book too, that's also discussed, right? Um, the idea of suffering and, the ability that we can reset or wake up from that. Um, could you talk a little bit more then about the role of the struggle in our soul growth? Because I've met a lot of people, and maybe you have too, Carole, that they just want to be here on earth and have everything just go really smoothly. And that means you're having a good life. But I don't know, maybe we need to sort of reframe what that means.
I would say good luck with that. It kind of reminds me of the expression, if you want to make God laugh, tell him what your plan to him or her, what your plans are. Because um, although we do have a framework, and in the books, the earlier books I've written, I call them blueprints. Blueprints are designs for our soul's journey here, and they're encoded, as I said earlier. um, so challenges are actually part of that. We would think, why would I sign up for challenges? And it's because we really do not evolve and grow without challenge.
Mm.
I mean, if you think about the tough times in your life, and everybody has had them. And I say people who say they don't, they're not being honest. But if you look at the really pivotal points in your life where you thought, how am I going to get out of this? How are things going to get better? What do I do with my life now? That's what I call sort of a wake up call. And it's through challenge that we're able to function by connecting with the soul and surrendering. That's why the second section of the art of sensing I titled Surrender.
Could this be boiled down to perhaps the opportunity? These things might give us the opportunity to break down illusions that we have about ourselves, who we are, our identity, and what that safety cocoon thing that we might have, um, I don't know, built around ourselves. Is that fair to say?
It is, because we have a personality, we have a rational mind, we have a body, but those are not our true identity. There are many, many, many people until they awaken who believe that they are their mind, that they are their thoughts. And you can see the result of that. Turn on the news for about 2 minutes, And you'll see the result of people believing that they are their thoughts, or that they are, they are what society told them they have to be, or they're letting their ego drive their existence. And that's the pivotal point where we have to go, wait a second, this isn't working. This isn't working. It's causing suffering. It's causing me to suffer. It's causing others to suffer. I believe we're in that point now. We're at a critical point in humanity's consciousness of standing at the precipice of really looking at, do we want to continue this way, or do we want to make another choice? And so it involves surrender to a different identity of yourself. And it's really not an identity at all, it's just beingness. Sort of like, hands on healing. I, like you, am a Reiki master. And that state of just being there, of, placing the hands and letting go, that is the spiritual presence. And so that's really what the art of sensing is about, is entering into that spiritual presence. Now, I might add that that doesn't mean that you totally let go of the personality or the mind. Absolutely not. We have to have those. Those are part of our identity, but they are not the real, with a capital R, identity. What is real, what will survive, and my mediumship has shown me this time and time and time again. What survives, what is eternal, what is indestructible, is the soul. And following the voice of that soul is what liberates us from suffering.
And so we all have that voice, correct?
Yes.
Within us, right? And so what I hear so often though is people, they don't trust it, they don't recognize it. Number one, why do you think that is? Why don't more people recognize the voice? And then what can we do to trust it more?
I talk about this, I write about this in The Art of Sensing, and actually all my 4 previous books too, helping people to access that part of themselves that is above the rational mind. And those are called the inner senses. And that higher knowing, higher wisdom that transcends thoughts and beliefs. So many of us identify with our thoughts. And so the first thing that we have to do is become the observer of those. I know that a lot of people have heard this, well, how do I become an observer of my thoughts? So it's sort of, the best way I know how to describe it is a pulling back, a pulling back. I always use this very simple analogy of, going out into your backyard or going to a park and lying down on the grass and looking up at the sky, and you're seeing white fluffy clouds there, and you're noticing those pass overhead. And so you're just observing those as they pass by. You're not pulling them to you, but you know that they're there. You're saying, there's clouds. That's what this means. So if we can make the clouds are our thoughts in this little example, that's what it means to detach from them. So we're not eliminating them, and you will never be able to do that, because the mind is doing what it's designed to do, and that is to think. But there is something beyond that, and that is what transcends that. That is our spiritual identity, our spiritual consciousness, which, this sounds really crazy, but by and large is empty. So, the most common thing, I've done many years of teaching spiritual topics, and through Lilydale and on my own and other places too. And people say, I can't stop my thoughts. That's the most common reaction. And so once I assure people, it's okay, you're never going to stop your thoughts. You simply transcend them. You recognize them, you acknowledge them, but you simply transcend them. And it's going into that emptiness. Now, you're not going to be totally empty because, again, you still have your mind operating. Um, One of the ways you can do that, very, very simple, is through the breath. Focusing on the breath. Those who do practice Reiki and hands on healing, sometimes when I'm doing a session, we have a Reiki group here where I live that we do a couple times of a month. I will actually focus on my own breath as I'm have my hands placed and during meditation as well. So this is not a long, involved process. It's very simple. I believe that's what, in the Christian Bible, Jesus meant in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to become like a little child. And I believe that's what he was talking about is simplicity. And that's available to all of us.
Yeah, and not attached to all of the different things, you know. A child, can play all afternoon or, whatever it is. There's a certain level of freedom there, they're not attached to everything. There's a lot there. I mean, I think that in what you just said, the part about the breath, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and it really does bring us to the body, that interior space, that very personal thing that no one else can know, right? I mean, when we tune into ourselves, that is our own place, our own space, and only we know what that's like. I don't know. I think that there's something to that. It's untouched by anyone else. And I just find there's such a vastness there. You know, I think sometimes people think of that as, boring or, something like just your breath. But if we will do that, there's so much that just opens up for us. Um, it's anything but boring, I would say.
Well, the thing that people need to know too is even just 3 minutes that you can do at your desk when you're at work, on your lunch break, maybe in the morning before your day gets started, and in the evening, 3 or 4 minutes, closing the eyes, getting this treadmill to slow down. And in the art of sensing, I read about the outer landscape, which is anything external to the sacred place that you were talking about, Andrea. The internal landscape is that part of us, that sacred stillness. So when you focus on the breath, it will pull you into that interior landscape. And that's the sacredness, the stillness, the peace. We all know that anxiety and depression are rampant nowadays. I mean, there's so many, particularly I've noticed so many young people who are confused, who are lost, who don't know what purpose is, what their purpose is, who are anxious, depressed. Now, some of that I believe is an over identification with things like social media, that drives competitiveness and the whole dopamine hit thing, when we get a like or whatever. This is a way to reset oneself that doesn't cost any money, that you don't have to go out and search for, that's right here within you. And to go into that, it's a reset from even, stress that you're experiencing perhaps at work or with your family or financial worries or, relationship challenges, whatever it might be. And I know most people go, well, what's that really going to do? You have to practice it. And at first, you might feel restless. You might feel, gee, this is boring. Like you were saying, nothing's coming. Well, that's really the point of it, is to enter into a sort of spaciousness, expansiveness, to really know the magnitude of your own spirit.
Yes, and I know for myself, that's where inspiration comes in for me. That's where guidance comes in for me. Um, and when people start to get the nudges or those, um, I don't know, the thoughts that aren't their own, maybe when they're still, how can they trust that? Or and maybe that's even leaping ahead. Can you talk about what that might be like for them? To maybe normalize it a little bit, because I think some people they don't know what it will be like, but then how will it be, perhaps, and then what do they do from there? How do they trust that?
There are qualities of being in the rational mind, our everyday waking consciousness, perhaps for some people, racing thoughts, perhaps ruminating on the past, which is we can call depression, or worrying about the future, which is anxiety. So when you enter into, and that's sort of what we operate in normally, or planning, or what's next, that sort of thinking, that sort of being, let me say it that way. And I guess it's really not being, it's doing, and that would be more of our ordinary waking consciousness. So the soul operates in timelessness, and when we're in that space, and you might just get glimpses of it, in no way am I saying that, oh, I did a 3-minute meditation, I'm going to walk around all day in this wonderful luxurious energy. No, that's probably not going to happen. But even to have small bits of it that we can retreat to, that we can pull up, because once we acclimate to what that feels like, then it's easier for us to recognize that, and for our rational brain to kind of go, okay, I'm entering into that space now. So I can just relax here. Thoughts come up. Okay, we're not going to act on them. We're not going to, go run out and do whatever with our thoughts. We're simply going to notice them. So it will feel still when we're in that space. It will feel perhaps timeless, even if we're just in there for a few minutes. It will feel um, large compared to our mind, which can get into this narrow box. And when we're connected with the soul, we feel sometimes, and if you practice this on a regular basis, unlimited attention, unlimited ability. This is where imagination exists. And by the way, a lot of people don't know this, but imagination comes from our right brain. That's the same place where intuition comes from. So we always think of imagination as, oh, yeah, I'm making that up, or, I'm fantasizing a story or whatever. But that's the very same faculty that operates when we're intuitive, when we're doing mediumship, when we're doing healing. We're being guided intuitively, perhaps how long to stay, in a particular area of the recipient's body, where to go on the body, and so forth. It's the same um, location in our brain, and it's spacious, it's unlimited, and importantly, people really need to understand this, it probably will not make sense to you when you get intuition, or you get, if you're asking for direction of your soul, it probably will not be, it may even be completely illogical, and you may balk at that, And you may say, well, that just doesn't make any sense. And in no way am I advocating to go out and do something completely off the rails or foolish. No, but sitting with it. And oftentimes, what I have found is that if I get a prompting, a sensing from that space, from that large space of intuition, 9 times out of 10, I pick up a book or I'm on the internet and there's some synchronicity of the same message. Or a person says to me, hey, Carole, blah, 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 and whatever it might be. And so, that's going to be your validation. You're not going to really get the external facts to be able to prove what sort of information that you're getting. That is lacking in intuition. So you had mentioned trust, and that's really, really important that we do that. That only comes with practice.
Right. And practice is ongoing. And I just really want to perhaps highlight this idea that, you mentioned 2, 3, 4 minutes. That is wonderful. And I would hope people can find a few minutes. I mean, my gosh, just to try it, if that's not what they're, if they're not doing it already. And if they are doing it already, add 3 or 4 extra minutes maybe when they sit down. But what I wanted to highlight here is this practice element. If people are wanting to know what their purpose is in life, they're not going to sit down for 4 minutes and, have it light up for them and be unmistakable. But they can begin to access those, the wisdom, right? And begin to get pieces, perhaps of inspiration or guidance. And maybe the invitation is just go in with a beginner's mind, not looking for hard answers about this or that. I mean, that's a big ask, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, rare is the individual that it goes, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing in life. Yeah, that's not realistic. But I'm going to use my own example of how I ended up on the pathway, and maybe you have, how your life unfolded too. I mentioned earlier about the fire. Now, at the time of that fire, and this is the importance of trust, because our mind is going, what do I do now? Where do I go? What happened? This is an emergency and all this. I had no inkling at that time that I would be set down on this pathway of doing thousands of readings for people nationally, internationally, writing books, doing interviews with wonderful people like you. I had no idea about that. But here's what happened. I slowly let go of the need to know. And that's what helps us to open that door. And another thing I'll share here is that my guides, my spirit team, I call them my spirit team, uh, said to me, I said, well, what about, what am I supposed to be doing? The $10 million question. That's what I call it. Because I've heard that so many times in readings. And you know what they said to me? Carole, rest in the unknowing. And I got really angry. I got really angry. I said, what do you mean? And I think I had a few choice words in there that I won't mention now. But I was very upset that I wasn't just going to get this light bulb, as you were saying, switch on and go, oh, it's that way. You go here and do, 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 do. And then they said to me, the second revelation they said to me was, if we told you everything now, you would be very overwhelmed. And I am in no way am I embellishing this. This is exactly how it came into my head. And that's what they said. And at the time I thought, oh, I could handle that. What are you talking about? Well, I couldn't, because I wasn't prepared as the vessel. When we're doing hands on healing, when we're doing readings, or any other type of spiritual conduit work, or we're interconnected with other people, the vessel has to be cleared in order to be a clear, effective conduit. And so we know, as the conduit, our own stuff is always going to come up. Our own stuff, meaning our own unbalanced energies, parts of ourself that we kind of pushed away. Some people call it the shadow side. All of that stuff I have had to look at, and it's always where, too, there's a client that'll book a reading. I'm like, son of a gun, that's exactly what I'm dealing with. And so that law of attraction is really working there. We can always depend on natural law. There's a whole chapter in the art of sensing on the natural laws and how to work with them. So we're not going to get the answers instantaneously, but trust is built, and it's built by knowing that you're safe, that the soul is eternal, that spirit has your back, that spirit's not going to let you fail, even though your mind is gone. We might have been indoctrinated when we were young. Well, you got to work hard, and then, you know, you die or whatever. These ideas we get from our family or from society or other places. But this is bypassing all of that. And it's going into the sacred, unique blueprint of your own soul.
There's so much there that you touched on, Carole. Oh, I love it. One of the things was that bit about what your guide said. And I love it because, when I was young, I was like that, like, tell me everything, I want to know, uh, you know, everything about my life and what I'm supposed to do. I totally get it. I was that person. And what I know now is that it would change how I would have behaved. If I would have had too much knowledge, I would have taken different actions. It would have influenced my journey in order to get there, right? So it's not always in our highest good, I guess, to know everything. And to me, I feel like that is that mental conditioning again, because I know I grew up with an importance on the thinking mind. And the more I knew, I thought that was better. And so I had all of that going on. And so it's been quite a reconciliation, to surrender, as you mentioned. But I think a lot of us have that. And also, we don't want to start the journey unless we know what the destination is, right? It's like, well, tell me where we're going and how we're going to get there first, and then I'll decide if I'm going to do it, right?
Yeah, I like that analogy. Well, okay, yeah, where am I going to end up? So that's really what I was asking many years ago. Why isn't this happening? How come I'm not on radio shows? How come this? How come that? So I needed to organically be on there. So what does that mean? Well, stepping into that space. We've all heard this, the space of allowing, and but it means the same thing as surrendering, and organically allowing our pathway to arise. And I have noticed, when I got out of trying to control, which was a natural thing that I grew up with, that I thought, well, I can make that happen. I can do this. I can accomplish that. My sun sign of Capricorn is kind of orientated towards that too, because Capricorn is the accomplisher in the zodiac. Climbing the mountain, the goat climbing the mountain. So it was difficult for me to enter into that space of saying, Spirit, I trust you. I trust you that you know more than I do. And this is why every single reading that I do a very brief little meditation beforehand so that I can give the absolute best as a pure conduit for that recipient. And to get out of the way, I mean, of course, I'm still present there in the session, but entering into allowing spirit to lead the session on where it needs to go. And sometimes that's very oftentimes it may be very different than what the client expects. I can't make anybody come through from the spirit world. I don't have control over that. So the work has taught me a whole bunch about the art of surrender and entering into that space of allowing. But you do not have to be a medium or a healer to employ this in your life. I mean, anybody can do this. And I guarantee you, if you practice this on a regular basis, not only will you be calmer, but you will see that things that used to get you upset or challenges that used to happen, that they may not go away entirely, but they lessen in their intensity because you're not reacting from your rational mind. You're simply allowing and observing.
Right. And then choosing a response. Instead of having that reaction, it is what a luxury that is to observe, and you have space to then decide, what would I like to do about that, if anything, And you can choose your words. And it's as though, I mean, for me, it's like there's so much more time, in the equation of life and responding and things when we're not reactive. But I wanted to ask you about time, because I think for a lot of people, that's the limiting factor here, because there, you had mentioned a few minutes ago, the soul is eternal. And yes, but I think a lot of people have difficulty with practices like this and the surrender that we talk about because they feel like they have limited time in order to accomplish what they're supposed to accomplish. And so there's an urgency about them. And I wonder, could you talk about that a little bit? And perhaps even um, from both sides, the living and the side of those in spirit.
Well, urgency is, again, it's coming from usually from our mind. In that this is the only place, meaning the earthly plane where we have time. That doesn't exist in the higher realms, the higher dimensions. Uh, I can't tell you how many times I've heard from communicating spirits that will come through in readings and say, and they're giving advice. They're coming from, this is what I learned. This is what I did when I was there. I learned this from doing that. And I'm passing along what I learned to you, to their loved one. And many of them say, I was really absorbed by this and I was always anxious. I always had anxiety, or I focused on that, always had to have my house clean, or I was always at work and I was doing this. I wanted to, become a millionaire or whatever by working so many hours. Not one of those people have I ever heard say, gee, that was a good choice that I made. Most of them go, here's what really matters. What really matters is service and love. Now, I'm a student of A Course in Miracles, the text with 365 lessons in it, and it talks also about forgiveness. So, the spiritual meaning of forgiveness is about a release of the past, being here now, being in the present, because that's all you have, that's all I have, that's all anyone has. Animals are great teachers to us of being in the present moment. So, urgency is most of it, I would say, is coming from the mind. I would say not all the time, because if our soul is prompting us to do something, then chances are that's something we do need to pay attention to. So, in that regard, I would say there is somewhat of an urgency with following that, but it will come about in the timing and in the way that it needs to. And if you would have known me years ago, and how I would say, well, I have to do this, and well, that isn't happening yet. I better make that happen. And now what I do is go, you know what? People who need to find me for readings will find me. And people who need this or that, or, the next book, it's going to arise organically. And there's such a difference in the approach between those two ways of being.
Yes. And what about that notion that people need to accomplish it all? I have to, find out what my purpose is so that I can accomplish it before I die, right? And so that's a whole nother type of limiting belief, urgency kind of thing. And so from the soul's perspective, um, what what would we say about that? Is this a fear of death that people have? It seems more complicated than that, though.
Well, certainly, if we think that this is our only life, and I'm not advocating you have to believe in reincarnation. I don't believe in it. I know it. I've seen it many, many years ago when I first started doing readings, almost 30 years ago. It just arose spontaneously. I would be sitting with a person, they're asking, what I call the big two, about relationships and about money, or work. All of a sudden, I would start seeing these scenes over their right shoulder, and I'm like, what is that? So eventually I worked up the courage to say to the person, have you ever been drawn to, Native American culture? Have you ever been drawn to France, or whatever it might be, a time period, a country? But importantly, what then started really coming through, and this is part of what I do today, what I offer, are different themes or patterns that the soul has worked through in multiple lifetimes. So the truth is that we can have multiple opportunities to work on one quality, like, patience, like compassion, like cooperation, anything that you would see as divine qualities, harmony, nurturing others. So these are all divine qualities. The soul can spend many, many lifetimes. This is not the only time that we have. To me, that's very comforting, because I don't have to feel rushed. That doesn't mean I become I just go, well, okay, I'll do it next time around. It doesn't mean that. But because we need to be here now and do what we can. Um, but what it does mean is that evolution is continuous. And so we don't really have to be rushed. And the important thing is to get it right. And we always have the opportunity to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and do it again the next day
Right.
or the next lifetime.
Or the next lifetime.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. It's such a fascinating thing, this theme, the themes that you mention. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about purpose then. So in your readings, does it ever come through, what information comes through sometimes for purpose? Um, a lot of people think it's their job. And so maybe we could talk a little bit about that. But what are some examples also of what Spirit has said their purpose is.
Yeah, well, first off, when most people say, "What is my purpose?" they are, as you said, looking at what am I supposed to be doing in the outside world? What is my career? How would I be earning money? That's a secondary purpose. The primary purpose is emanating those qualities of spirit. However, whatever form that might take, you are meeting the soul's purpose. I would say that number one. But there's also a corollary to that, and it's this that there are different rays of souls. Now, in the art of sensing, I read about different soul pods. Same word for groups. Okay. Um, and sometimes these can be through many, many lifetimes that we are with this same group. We're learning about service, for example. We're learning about teaching, for example, healing, as you do, and as I do, and others. Um, so, I mean, usually we will stay with that particular group, and we emanate that ray. And so I will sense that, or the person's spirit guide is always present in the session along with my guides, and they will impress me through clairsentience, which means sensing through the inner senses. uh here's a clue, here's a signpost as to what this individual is working on. And I think people really, really need to understand that a purpose, I'll put that in quotes, is not necessarily some big noble, you know, accomplishment in the outside world. It can be very simple. To me, I mean, being a mother is a purpose. My gosh, where would we be without without mother, a mother or a father? Um, Maybe helping children, volunteering, becoming a school aide, helping the elderly. That this is all emanation of spirit. And so it doesn't have to be that your name is in lights and you're on Broadway or something, a big noble purpose. In fact, humility, learning humility and serving in a way that, in quietly going about your business, but being of service is a very noble purpose to have.
Yeah. So soul pods, that's very interesting. Um, and we stay with that group, that pod for some time. Is that what you said?
Usually, and I'll tell you why, because of the quality of the consciousness. So, in other words, if we have all souls starting out the same, our ego and our personality through multiple lifetimes create, uh, you know, layers around the light of that soul. That's why, we're only here. The only reason we're here on earth is to remove more layers from that light. We've all heard this, don't hide your light under a bushel basket. And that's from the Christian Bible. And so the purpose is to let that light, that's purpose. Letting your light out there. Your light may go in a different direction, it may shine in a different direction than mine, but that doesn't mean that anybody's light is superior. I don't care if you're, cleaning restrooms in an airport, or you're a politician or whoever. There is something embedded within you that is desiring, and that's coming from the soul, to serve. Now, the other part too, just to elucidate this whole thing about how does this come up in sessions, a lot of times I will use the birth chart, the astrological birth chart of the individual, and I look at these things called nodes, the lunar nodes, and there are two of them. and there are direct axes and opposite signs in the zodiac. So the north node is the direction the soul needs to be going. All of those qualities that are contained within that sign are what the soul is learning. The south node, by contrast, is qualities that the soul has become very accustomed to. So it doesn't mean that we're done with that or that we're going to lose it, but we need to move forward now into these new qualities and to have more practice with them. So that's another tool that I use when I help people to understand, what am I supposed to be doing?
Yes. I love how the different systems complement each other and your work, and you bring all of that in. And what I would, I guess, ask as we get ready to close out our time together is 15,000, well, over 15,000 readings. I that's just mind blowing in and of itself. But after so many readings, I think my first question is, what is the main message that souls and spirit want us to know today? And part of that too, Carole, is, has that changed from reading 100 to reading 15,100?
It has changed in that there's so much more depth and healing that I personally observe coming through. And that's not coming from me. It's just like with Reiki, it's not coming from the individual, it's coming through the individual. There is so much more depth and clarity in the readings from when I first started. Of course, I have taken many years with master teachers here on the earth plane to hone the skill of mediumship. I was born with the sensitivity. That doesn't make me any better than anyone else. It simply means this is what I need to be doing this time, to evolve myself, and also at the same time to provide service to people. So there's a lot more depth. There's a lot more healing. There's not a lot more clarity. Um, and I would say how I have changed personally is I'm a hugely different person. And I mean that. I'm not, making that hyperbole. I really am much more compassionate, much more tuned in to really focusing on the needs of that client. That's why I use the tools that I do. Whatever's going to help a person is what I use, whether it be the tarot. I've also written about the tarot and the art of sensing and in my other books, how there are archetypes in the tarot. I've studied astrology for over 15 years. And of course, mediumship, and then my own ability. So a combination of those things. Yeah, I mean, it's what's going to serve that person, not what I think, but how spirit is guiding me to assist that person. So the depth of the reading has definitely changed, in that there's much more clarity in them. The number one message I would say through many, many years, this is going to sound really crazy, but in Wisdom from the Spirit World, my book right before the Art of Sensing, there are 8 lessons, repeating themes that I personally have seen through multiple readings. The number one message or communication is, I go on. I'm not deceased. I'm very much alive. I'm probably more alive than you are. Don't talk about me as if I'm gone. I'm not gone. There is an afterlife. There is an afterlife. Very simple message, very sort of common sense message, but there are people who do not believe that there is anything after we leave here, that they are just a biological form that, is going to die someday. So I would say that is probably the most common message from the spirit world. And how is that communicated? through presenting very strong evidence of that soul and spirit's knowledge of what is going on with their loved one who is having the reading. Oh yeah, I see that you just moved. Mom has been sick recently. You're remodeling your kitchen. I mean, these are the little, what I call little psychic messages that I would have no way of knowing, but that loved one in spirit, their consciousness is still with that loved one. And so they do know it.
Oh, that's remarkable. That's remarkable. And so, shifting to what you would have for a final message from the book, the new book, The Art of Sensing, if you could let our audience know one favorite message that you've tried to convey in the book, what would that be?
Probably that everything you need, and I know we've all heard this, but it's so important that it does bear repeating. Everything that you need, you already have. You don't have to go out and buy it, get it, obtain it, find it in a relationship. It's in here. And it doesn't take anything for you to discover it. We all have equal access to that. But it does require your willingness to make time in your schedule. 3 minutes here, 3 minutes there, to sit and enter into that sacred place, that garden of beauty that is within each of us. And there you will find, again, I refer to the Bible, but there's so many beautiful sayings of Jesus in the Bible. The kingdom of heaven is within, and that's really where it lies. And I also love, speaking of healing, because this is a Reiki podcast, that you too can do these things and greater, when Christ healed people. And I think it's just wonderful that we can use his sayings and to use his example, that we all also have equal access to not only healing ourselves, but acting as the conduit for others who are in need, and to remove judgment from that.
Beautifully said, Carole. What a joy it is to talk with you. And, we've just really scratched the surface, really, of what you have there in the book and all the wisdom that you have to share. So I want to thank you for being here. And for those listeners and the viewers on YouTube who want to connect with you, what is your website? Is that the easiest way that they can find you?
Soulvisions.net. That's on the web, soulvisions.net. And all of my books are available there. That's the only place you'll get an autograph copy. My publisher, collectiveinc.com.
Ah, beautiful. Beautiful. They can find your social media through your website, I would bet
Yes.
too. Yes.
Yeah, right
Okay.
there on the homepage.
Oh, nice. That makes it easy. Thank you so much, Carole.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. And you can check the show notes or visit the website beyondthereikigateway.com to find out more about the podcast and connect with me. Please keep in mind that views and opinions expressed in the show don't necessarily reflect those of the podcast or anyone affiliated with its production or advertising. This program is presented for your entertainment only, and all information provided is to be utilized at the listener's own discretion. I, along with the BTRG team, hope you enjoy the show as much as we enjoy making it for you. Wishing you highest blessings until we meet again beyond the Reiki Gateway.